Okay, thank you everyone for attending this session, Referencing with Confidence. My name is Matt Lumsden. I'm from the library's learning support team. Um, Basically, what this session is intended to do is to just give you an introduction and overview to referencing for the assignments and the essays that you'll be writing. So it's a very short session, only probably not even half an hour. But we'll try to cram in as much as possible. But I'll just let you know that we are recording this session. So you can, we will send out the link. We'll put the video up on our YouTube channel and then we'll send out the link to everyone who's registered for the session today. So you will be able to refer back to it. So if you do happen to miss anything or if you want some um, clarification, you can go back and view the video again. Okay, just to begin with, we acknowledge and pay our respects to the Kaurna people, the traditional custodians whose ancestral lands we gather on. We acknowledge the deep feelings of attachment and relationship of the Kaurna people to country, and we respect and value their past, present, and ongoing connection to the land and cultural beliefs. Okay, so just a quick overview about what we're going to go through today. Basically, just an introduction to what is referencing, what it involves, of course, why we need to reference, when to reference, just a bit of an overview of the different referencing styles and where to get help to wrap things up. Okay, so what is referencing? Essentially, referencing is basically acknowledging the sources that you use in your research, in your study, in the material that you're writing, your assignments and essays. So basically, everything that you happen to use, everything that you read and refer to, everything that you have cited and sourced in your assignments will need to be acknowledged. So that includes all of these different examples of course books and journal articles, but even things like images and photos, videos, social media, web pages, and even artificial intelligence, which is something that's sort of new on the horizon, but it's something that people are using quite a lot these days, especially in their assignments. So it is something that needs to be, you need to acknowledge that you're actually using it. So essentially referencing comes in, it makes up, it's made up by two sort of two different sections. So you get generally in-text citations or footnotes, which occur within the text of a document, and also a reference list or bibliography. And that generally comes at the end of the writing, the piece of writing that you've done. So there's a reference list or a bibliography. I'll go through the difference in just a minute. But also in terms of the formatting, punctuation is very important. So punctuation and syntax. Different referencing styles will have different different variations on how you need to actually present your citations, and that will include the punctuations, punctuation marks, commas, full stops, etc. So just quickly on referencing styles. Referencing styles are basically a set of standardized conventions. There's thousands and thousands of different referencing styles. Some of the more common ones are Harvard, APA, Chicago, AGLC, which is the law referencing style. We have our own version of Harvard U of A, which is one of the more common ones used within the University of Adelaide. But as I said, yeah, there's thousands of different ones, and it will be up to depend on what sort of discipline, what subject area you're in, as to which referencing style you'll be expected to use, and that's something that you'll need to check with your course coordinators and your teachers. Okay, so this is just an example of how they're formatted. So you can see the in-text citations or footnotes generally within the text of the document. So you'll see them in brackets there. Footnotes will be at the bottom of the page. There's not as many footnoting systems as there are that use in-text citations. So, but they appear at the bottom of the page and they're numbered. And your referencing list appears at the end of your piece of writing. So, and that'll be a list of everything that you've cited within the document, the writing you've done. So just yeah, quickly on what a referencing list is and what a bibliography is. Referencing list is basically includes only the sources that you've referred to. So it's things that you specifically cited and referred to in your writing. So where you've actually cited a quote or you've paraphrased or referred to someone else's idea, that's where you need to include in your reference list. Bibliography is an additional list, and it can be just extra material that you've read that was helpful, but that you haven't necessarily referred to. So just sort of extra reading material you might have done, which was good for background, but wasn't necessarily used within the actual writing itself. And again, as I said at the bottom, if unsure, check with your course coordinator or teachers about what they expect. Okay, this is just another example of where in-text citations will appear, and also an example of a referencing entry. So it just sort of breaks down what's included in a referencing list, which is generally the name, would either be the author. So it'll either be an individual or individuals' names, or an organizational name, an institutional name. You'll generally have the date of publication, and the title of the resource, and also the publisher. Um, Generally for printed material, you'll have a location where it was printed. But if it's an online resource, then it would include the URL for that particular resource. And that would differ. I mean, this is one particular style that would differ depending on which referencing style you use. So some they will look slightly different depending on which style you are actually using. Okay, so a couple of questions about why we need to reference. One of the main reasons is to avoid plagiarism, which is has been and is a real problem in universities. Basically, passing off someone else's work as your own. Uh, that's probably one of the fundamental reasons why you need to cite, so that you're not passing off someone else's work and claiming it as your own, which is highly problematic, obviously. Another reason is to show that you are well informed, to show that you've done the reading, to show that you've actually done the research, you've found the sources which are relevant to your argument, and you've been able to construct an argument using those resources and cited them appropriately. And similarly, yeah, they support the claims that you make. Oops, sorry about that. Sorry about that. Yeah, they support the claims that you make. They again, it shows you've done the reading. You've constructed an argument and you found sources and material that actually supports the argument that you're making. Another reason is to provide verifiable details. So it's important that you've provided those sources so that they can be checked and verified, that they are accurate and that they actually do exist, so that they're not made up, they're not fabricated. And you can actually, and the markers and your lecturers and course coordinators can actually go and check the work, check the sources you cited, and actually see that they are legitimate and that they have actually supported the claims that you've made. And lastly, also just to acknowledge the work of others. That's a really important thing to do, that someone else has done the groundwork before you. They've produced a paper, they've written a book. So it's important that that's acknowledged, and that you've read that book and you've cited it as something that's supported your case as well. Okay, so this is just a little activity to show when you need to reference. So for any source that you come across, or for any piece of idea in your writing that you've come up with, you need to ask whether you need to reference. So are the words your own? If yes, you don't need to reference that. So if you're using your own words and it's your own idea, you don't need to reference that. If no, then you do actually need to provide an in-text citation and add the full details of the work to your reference list. And again, if is the idea your own? So is it something you've come up with on your own? If yes, again, you do not need to reference that. An idea that you've come up with on your own without taking it from another source. If no, um, you need to ask a further question whether it's common knowledge. So things that are just basic factual knowledge, common knowledge, um, versus those things that may be only known to researchers or people who have read widely in the field. So if yes, if it is common knowledge, then you do not need to reference. But if no, again, did you think of it yourself or are you paraphrasing someone else's idea? So again, if you've thought of it yourself, even if it isn't common knowledge, if you've thought of it yourself without having done prior reading, um, then you do not need to reference it. But if it is an idea that's not common knowledge, but that you've come across somewhere else in another source, in another article or book, but it's sort of vaguely corresponds to something you've thought of, but you are actually still paraphrasing someone else's work, then you will need to provide an in-text citation and add the details to the reference list. So there's just a number of steps you need to go through for everything that you're using um, within your assignments and your research. All the ideas that you're using, just sort of go through this sort of checklist to verify whether you need to reference or not. And most of the time, if you're using someone else's work, if it's something that's an idea that you've had, but that you've sort of you've found the same idea in other people's work, it is a good idea to reference it anyway. So when in doubt, basically. Okay, so as I said before, there is a number of different style guides within that you may be using through the course of your study. We have some help pages and support pages for some of those more commonly used ones. What I'll do now is I'll actually go back to the library webpage. So on the library homepage, under the library search box there, if you just keep scrolling down, there's a referencing support page. So this is basically the best place to go if you need any sort of referencing advice, um, any sort of support material. Just click on this link here. Okay, so there's a couple of things there. I'll just quickly take you to the FAQs. So that little activity I just showed you then about how do I know when to reference, that's actually replicated here. So if you want to refer back to that through the website, you can actually come to the FAQs under how do I know when to reference, and there's a text version there, but also you can go back to that activity that I showed you just before. So there's a number of other reference FAQs there as well. There's a link to more style guides. So these are style guides for some of the more commonly used referencing styles. So we've got the AGLC, the law one, APA 7 and Vancouver, and also a couple more specialist ones. So we've got one, we actually have a guide for artificial intelligence. So as I said before, that's an emerging technology. It's you may or may not be able to use it within your study and within your assignments. That's something you need to check with your course coordinators. But there are strict recommendations and that you'll need to follow if you are using artificial intelligence technology in any way in your study. So if you click on that guide there, that will there's a guide, general guide to artificial intelligence, but there is also a guide to citing and acknowledging AI, and it goes through the recommendations for each of these main referencing styles there. Okay, if you are using Harvard U of A, which is one of the more heavily used referencing styles, particularly in the humanities and social sciences, we actually have this interactive Harvard U of A guide. So this is sort of, it breaks down all of the different examples you may need to refer to in your work. So there's information about different item types. So if you click on any one of these down here, journal articles, there'll be different subtypes. So you can have print journals, online and web journals, and whether there's more than one author as well. So if you click on any of these, you'll see on the right hand side there the way that you need to format a reference, as well as as well as examples of the in-text citation and the reference list citation. So it's a really handy tool to use if you are using Harvard U of A. This will give you a pretty thorough breakdown of every sort of source you might need to cite within Harvard. Unfortunately, we only have that for Harvard at this point. We don't have that for the other referencing styles just at the moment. Um, You may also, there's a couple of other places to look for in terms of information about writing and plagiarism, paraphrasing, and other assignment writing help. The Writing Center is a good place to visit for that. They have you can visit the website, but they will say you can make an appointment to see someone there. They can give you advice on various aspects of your writing, especially specifically if you're looking for information about academic integrity and plagiarism. Okay. Okay, so just go back to the. All right, so if you need any help with your referencing, there's, as I showed you, that referencing support guide is the best place to start. You can also speak to the Ask Library staff. So they're situated on level 3 of the library. Just for the people in the red shirts, they can give you some personal advice face to face, or you can contact them by email or phone. As I said, the Writing Centre is also a good place to contact regarding any sort of advice you need with your writing, and also your course coordinator. Um, they will be able to tell you what referencing style you need to use, and just other sort of specific details regarding your course, your subject area, whether there's any guidelines which are specific to that particular area of study. And I'll just quickly show you if you want to contact the library on the library homepage, the Ask Library link there. You can come in. There's a chat service. There's also an email service. You can email them or call them as well. So there's various options if you want to contact the library. So that basically wraps up the session today. There's a fair bit of information there, but I hope that was useful. If you've got any feedback for us, feel free to click on that the QR code there. But that's basically all we were going to show you today. As I said before, if you have any uh, if you did need to refer back to the session, if you wanted to relook at some of the aspects of the video, we're going to send out the link to you to the video sometime in the near future. So yeah, everyone who's registered for this session will get a copy of that link. So if you have any questions, we've got a couple of minutes left. I can answer any questions on the spot. Otherwise, you're free to go, and good luck with your studies.